name is Crystalynn, and I'm doing a refutation on Mario's speech. The United States public school system does little to address childhood obesity. Mario's claims are the U.S. has cut available a number of PE courses offered, has failed to regulate competitive food sold, and have a limited number of nutrition classes available. I think we can all agree that obesity epidemic is a huge issue in our country and isn't to be taken lightly. However, here the issue isn't the epidemic, it's whether the schools are doing enough to combat the issue. The school system and our local, state, and federal governments are taking large strides in creating programs and initiatives to fix the problem. Even our First Lady has taken an active role to reduce obesity among children, such as programs Get Up and Move. The National Association of State Boards of Education has written, health and success in school are interrelated. Schools cannot achieve their primary mission of education if students and staff are not healthy and fit physically, mentally, and socially. His first claim was that the U.S. has cut the number of available PE courses. The laws for time dedicated to physical education are clearly established. For example, the California Education Code 51222 provides 400 minutes for physical education every 10 days for students in grades 7 to 12. This translates to 40 minutes a day for the 10 days. Mario had stated that 30 minutes of daily activity a day helps fight obesity, and this exceeds that recommendation. His second claim was that public school system has failed to limit the quality of competitive food sold. An article published in the U.S. News in July 2013 states that federal regulations will strip junk food from elementary and high school vending machines in 2014. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a report that analyzed state policies for food and beverage served outside the school lunch line, which noted that 39 states already have state law, regulation, or policy in place related to sale or availability of snack foods and beverages in schools. In many cases, local levels, district and school policies and practices exceed state requirements or recommendations. USDA's proposal would establish a national baseline of these standards with the overall goal of improving the health and nutrition of our kids. The baseline proposed by the USDA would include regulations on sodium, fat, calories, and sugar. According to the article in the Washington Post, new guidelines that were released in June and to take effect in September 2014, food must have fewer than 200 calories, less than 230 milligrams of sodium, less than 35% of their calories from fat, and less than 35% of their weight from sugar. Mario stated that the regulations on cafeteria food, but that there weren't any on the competitive food. However, along with the guidelines I just listed, there's a second part dedicated to the competitive foods. Competitive food must meet the same sugar and fat requirements, which is less than 35%, but sodium can have up to 480 milligrams and up to 350 calories. His last secondary claim was that public schools currently don't have enough hours dedicated to nutrition education. The USDA provides many helpful options to parents and teachers. They awarded $5.2 million in grants to provide training and technical assistance for child nutrition, food service professionals, and support stronger school nutrition education programs. They also have such resources as choosemyplate.gov and It's My Plate Simple to provide quick, easy reference tools for parents, teachers, healthcare professionals, and communities. In conclusion, the school system and the state and federal government have been making great strides in allowing physical education during school hours. There have been plenty of new regulations that require junk food to be removed from schools and replaced with healthy food options. The USDA created grants that provide money to support stronger school nutrition educational programs.
Under control. I like these numbers. They're very colorful.
So you see them.
So you see them. Very clean too. Good bubble letters.
Once you start going out.
I'm so manic today.
All right, all the structural stuff, Crystalynn, is fine. It's easy to follow the argument based on the way you've labeled the advocate's points and the signposting in the body of the speech. I do think that sometimes in the body of the speech you had some of the same issues that I mentioned earlier, and that is that you have a tendency to start presenting the information without telling us what the claim is that you're making from this information. So for example, on that first point about the PE requirements, you've got a direct contradictory argument here that applies to this. The advocate says that they're cutting in PE courses, and your response is simply that the PE requirements continue to be extensive. And here's the example of California. That's the way I think that claim needs to be phrased. As it is, you're just kind of reading the evidence and giving us this factual data about what the minutes are required, how that averages out. I like that part, fine, it's good information. The place where you're really making an inference is at the end of that when you say, look, the advocate said 30 minutes a day is what's necessary, and we are exceeding that by 10 minutes a day. So here's the claim that you're actually making. Clearly it's not the requirements of the school that are inadequate to produce this problem. The schools continue to require exactly, in fact, more than what the advocate says that students need to be healthy. So this problem has to be coming from something other than what the schools are doing. That's the claim that you need to be making here, that it's not, because ultimately the advocate's pointing the finger at the schools and saying they're not doing enough, and your answer is the schools are doing plenty, and here are the things that they're doing, which it's easy for us to make that inference. I just think you need to make that declaration. I thought you made the clearest part of that declaration at the end of the speech in the summary, which is a good place to do that because it's like that one last punch that you're given. Say, see, this is the point that I was trying to make. I just think it needs to be the same way in the rest of the speech. The same thing on the other points too. I thought that on the second point where you talked about all the quality of food, you've got a lot of data about what these new requirements are going to be. There's not any contrast to the information or the argument that the advocate presented. So, for instance, if their data is based on something from 5 or 6 years ago, and we've got these new requirements that are going into place right now, then the argument could be, maybe the advocate was correct 5 years ago that we aren't controlling the quality of the foods, but if you're talking about a contemporary argument, their claim was that we're failing to do this. The truth is that we have 39 states that already have strict regulations on this. We have federal standards that are being put into place this year that are going to eliminate a lot of those things, and they're going to apply to the cafeteria foods as well. And that, and so really the question then becomes, how can this be inadequate since it fits perfectly with what the advocate was talking about? These are, in fact, the standards. It directly contradicts the advocate's position. Same sort of thing. Make the comparison a little bit more. I think you guys are doing a good job finding the counter arguments, and even the counter arguments that address some of the issues of the warrants or even the grounds that the advocates are using. But you're not really making the comparisons yourselves. You're trying to let us or force us to make the comparisons, and you want to make your arguments a little bit more thorough that way. And you're going to need to do that when we get to the debates, and you're going to be doing that plenty of times. So let's make sure that that comes up right. Same thing on the educational, on the last point where we're getting education. In this particular case, I think there's a good opportunity. You do say, look, we're spending a bunch of money on education, that sort of thing. I don't know what they say. I don't remember what they said we weren't spending the money on, that sort of thing. But I think that there are other reasons why we're facing an obesity problem that have little to do with the schools and a lack of education. And I think this would be a good place for maybe some of those counter arguments that are rebuttal issues as opposed to direct attacks on the warrant and the grounds of the advocate, but say, look, you point the finger at the schools, families ought to be looking in the mirror to see where the source of the problem is. We ought to be looking at the society that we live in and the culture that we've created if we want to understand these things. It's easy to point to the schools and say, kids are at school, they're fat, it's got to be the school's fault. But, the kids don't live at school, they don't do everything at school, and the thing that makes them fat it maybe has very little to do with the schools. And I think that that's a legitimate counterclaim that you kind of miss the opportunity on even, you're looking for the obvious, can I say something that's the opposite of what they have? And there's another good argument there that I think you just miss a chance to pick up on. All right, thank you.